This is the brand new pedalboard bass guitar amp from Blackstar, the Amped one. In this video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about this. I'll explain the features, demonstrate a variety of guitar tones, and show you how to integrate it into your current pedalboard. I also thought it'd be a good idea to see how well this works in the real world. I'll be taking it into a band rehearsal space and putting it up against the loudest drummer I can find. Then you'll know for sure whether this tiny amplifier really can hold its own in a live situation. And just so you know, Blackstar are not paying me for this, but they did provide this for the video. So, when you get this, the box looks like this, and within that box, there's another box. So we have the instructions. Don't know why I did that. Looks good, feels good, solid metal. Before I go over the features, let's continue looking at what's in the box. So we've got a Blackstar sticker, Blackstar VIP access pass, which is register free for your extended 3-year warranty. Definitely recommend you do that. This is for the effects loop. You'll probably need this. USB cable, power lead, and this cool little MIDI to MIDI TRS type cable. So let's have a look at the top of the pedal. So it starts off with a gain control. Next is the voice switch, which goes between USA, which is like a Fender kind of clean sound, UK, which is more of a Marshall high gain sound, and flat, which is probably best suited if you're using an overdrive or distortion pedal or a modeler in front of this. Next we have a 3-band EQ control, bass, middle and treble. Here we have a power switch, which switches between 1 watt, 20 watts or 100 watts. And lastly, in this sort of line of controls is the master volume. Next, down here we've got the reverb section. So we've got a controller that controls the amount of reverb and a switch to turn it on and off. Here is quite an interesting control. It's called the response. And it switches between which power amp valve simulation you'd like. So you can go from EL84 all the way up to KT88 and sort of anything in between. It's also got a linear control down here, so if you're using an amp modeler into the return of this, that's probably the best option to go for in that situation. It's also got a preset control, so you can control switch between a couple of presets. On the back here, we've got a fan, we've got a MIDI input, which is the TRS style MIDI input. Luckily, they give you the leads to convert standard MIDI to that TRS in the box, so that's really cool. We've got the input, we've got a stereo jack for the effects loop. Again, they give you the lead to convert that as well. 8 ohm output, 16 ohm output, and a 9 volt output for your effects pedals. So that provides up to 500 milliamps. So hopefully that'll be enough, but either way, it's a really cool feature. USB, so you can do your updates and that kind of thing. Use it as a interface as well. On-off switch. On the side here, we've got a line out or headphone out. Balanced XLR output, which is really important for live situations. A really cool feature that they've added there. A level control for that, and a cab switch. So it comes loaded with 3 different cabinets and you can select which one is your favourite. This is probably the most simple way to use this. I've got the guitar going straight into the input, nothing in between. The output's going to a cabinet that I've got in the corner over there, which is a vintage 30 loaded 212, mic'd up with an SM57. I'll give you a few different sounds briefly, but this part of the video is more to demonstrate the ways that you can set the unit up and integrate it into your own rig. Bear in mind that later on in the video, I'm going to go really in-depth and geeky and show different pickups, different guitars, different settings, so stick around for that. Okay, so now I want to play more of a crunchy sound. I put the EL34 mode on. I've put it onto the UK setting on the voice. Gains at 50%, 12 o'clock. Reverb, going 9 o'clock. And it sounds like this. And lastly, we'll move on to a high gain setting that I really like. So for this setting, I like to use the KT88 power tubes. Turn the gain up to about 2, 3 o'clock. UK mode on the voice. And although this is still on the UK setting on the preamp, it really reminds me of channel 2 of a dual rectifier. I'd like to show you how I would use this in a live setting to make the most of its features. I think this is one of the ways of setting it up that really allows the amp to shine. We've got two pedals, both being powered by the amp. We've got a tube screamer in the front end, and we've got an MXR carbon copy delay in the loop, all mounted to a Metro 16 pedalboard by pedal train. So for example, if we were using the previous tone that I made, the rectifier style sound that I really like, we could use that as my main rhythm tone. Roll the volume down for a bit of clean. Or change preset to a clean sound. Kick on an overdrive in the front end for some heavy riffing. And lastly, add some delay for some leads. And this is more of a personal preference, but the way I would run this live is I'd send the XLR out to the front of house. I'd use the cab out to a cab on stage to control my own personal monitoring. That way I can have as much or as little of myself as I want without affecting what's going out to the sound engineer. The second way of setting it up that I'd like to show you is by incorporating a multi-effects or an amp modeler, in this case the HX Stomp by Line 6. And what that means is you can use something called the 4-cable method. You might be aware of it or you might have never heard of it, but essentially what it is using all the pre-distortion effects like compressor, wah and overdrive in front of the amp, all the time-based and modulation effects like reverb, delay, chorus in the loop of the amp. And as the name suggests, it involves 4 cables. You can find loads of diagrams online. It's easy enough once you sort of understand the concepts. And using it this way even allows you to bypass the preamp section of the amp one in case you've got a favourite preamp that you like in your Fractal or Helix or whatever it is you use. And the last really cool thing I'd like to point out about this setup is the MIDI integration. You can use one controller to switch both units at the same time, making presets and combinations of sounds virtually limitless. And lastly, if you're the kind of player that likes to get all their tones and sounds from their pedals or pedal boards, this can be the ideal pedal platform amp. I'd recommend starting off with the preamp on flat and the power amp on linear. That gives you the cleanest, most transparent bass for your pedals. But there's no real rules for this kind of thing, so just play around with it and see what you think sounds best. Another benefit to using it in this way is if anything goes wrong with your pedals or pedal boards, you've got an entire backup just here. So it's all well and good going over specs and giving sound samples in a controlled environment like my home studio, but let's find out how it holds up against the loudest drummer I've ever played with. Okay, so here we are. We've hired out a rehearsal studio and I've got my long-time friend and blurry drummer in the background there. This is Jason, and we're going to go through some sounds. So I'm using my favourite settings that I found in the unit so far, which is the UK voicing with the KT88 power tube simulation. I'm also making use of the 9-volt output by powering a tube screamer in the front end and a MXR carbon copy in the loop. So currently with the EQ set flat, everything at 12 o'clock, and with the tube screamer on, it sounds something like this. So that was with the volume on about 10 o'clock on the 100-watt mode, and I'm not sure if this will be able to translate very well over the sort of audio recording, but it is very loud and the amount of power left in it is scary. So hopefully to give you a bit of perspective on how loud and usable this amp is, we're going to play a bit of drums and guitar, and then after that I'll show you a bit of drums, guitar with a load of backing tracks and stuff going through a 1000-watt PA as well. So I'm not actually sure what take you're going to see of that, because halfway through the first take I realised that the guitar might be way too loud. So I think that answers the question straight away, but it'd be boring if we cut it there. So let's add in some backing tracks and see how that sounds. We've recently got back from a short UK run of gigs, a short UK tour, and I used a very similar kind of setup, an amp that was designed to go on a pedal board, and I used it in a very similar way to what I'm doing today, and I can tell you that this is way louder. I was having to run that thing on sort of full volume, and I was still struggling at some of the gigs. This one is currently running 16 ohms into this Blackstar cab. With the Blackstar Amped one, volume is not an issue, and I hope this part of the video has been able to clearly demonstrate that to you, and hopefully it translates well over YouTube. With this unit, you're going to have more than enough power for any gig. I'd now like to demonstrate the wide variety of sounds that are available with the Amped one. I've got a Strat, a Tele, a Les Paul, single coils, humbuckers, a Fishman modern Fluence pickup, so hopefully everybody will be able to find at least something of value in this section of the video. Now I'm going to quickly run through the 3 cab sims that are preloaded into the Amps one. And for this demo, I'm using the UK voice sim with EL34s. The gain and the EQ section are all set to 1 o'clock. I hate taking heavy gear to gigs. 99% of the time, unless it's a very special event, I'm not taking any of this stuff that's behind me. But these days, that doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your sound. With the way modelers are at this point, something like this needs to be really good to compete, and in terms of sound and tone, I think it does. The clean and mid-gain tones on this sound amazing. I think Blackstar have really nailed it here in terms of feel and sound. It was so easy to dial it in to sound like a clean Fender combo with the USA voice or a crunchy plexi with the UK setting. To me, in a heavier setting, it does need an overdrive to push the front end, but I'd say that about a JCM 800 or rectifier, so in that sense, it's very similar to a traditional guitar amp head. I really enjoyed the sound of it in the rehearsal studio with the Tube Screamer. That was a sound I would absolutely gig with, and I feel confident that I'd have enough volume for any venue. And the noise level was pretty low considering the amount of gain we had when the overdrive was added. The cab sims sound good to me. They're a lifesaver at a gig, no worrying about bleed or a badly mic'd up speaker. I think this bridges the gap between more traditional guitar players and the digital world that so many newer players live in. It doesn't cram a million sounds in, but what it does have is usable and good sounding. I think we've seen with the recent success of the Fender Tonemaster series that there's a whole group of players that just want a few great sounds without scrolling through endless menus, and this will definitely appeal to them. It's easy to work with, easy to use, it's a tangible thing. You move knobs and the sound changes. It sounds silly, but for a little unit that looks like this, it's refreshing. On the other hand, with the MIDI integration, you can expand on what Blackstar have offered here. You can sculpt and create with no limitations if that's what you prefer. It's impressive how useful this thing can be considering how few switches and controls there are. This can be your silent home practice amp with the headphone output, or it can connect to your computer via a USB-C cable and become your recording interface, which I think is a really useful feature for touring musicians who want to record on the road or in hotel rooms. So what does it have over the competition? Well, for a start, it's built like a tank. It's not overly heavy, but it's substantial and has a reassuring weight to it. It also comes with a 3-year warranty. It's more stripped back in terms of controls, which sounds like a downside, but as someone who plays live, it's less to go wrong. The black text on the white background make it really easy to change settings on a dark stage. It's things like this that make me think that Blackstar have really thought it through with the live player in mind. And my last point to back up that theory is the fact that it doesn't matter if you're using an 8 ohm cab or a 16 ohm cab. The power delivery is still the same. So many of these small amps drop to 70% or even half the power when using a 16 ohm cab. If you're looking for a pedalboard amp, I'd recommend this. It's a very good product. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think down below. Goodbye.